Now we have looked at the occupation of the Balotelland of that is north western Rhodesia. Now let's look at how the British also occupied the Wembaland, that is the north eastern Rhodesia. So Bembaland was occupied late by the British due to a number of reasons. What were they? Number one were that the chief colonizers were busy elsewhere. So Rhodes was busy with the southern Rhodesia. So Rhodesia they were busy again with the Nyasaland, together with Harry Johnson. They were busy again to look after, to occupy Nyasaland. And also, it was feared that the organized African groups of the region would offer a very stiff opposition to the forces of colonization. So we talk of the people of the Bembaland that we talked about. We said that they were hostile, like the Mpezi and Ngoni, who were the raiders, and again the Wemba, the Swahili Arab groups, and the Kazembe. Those people, they were participating in slave trade. It meant that they were fully equipped. They had weapons that they could use maybe to resist. So they feared, the company feared that one. And also diplomatic questions had to be settled concerning who was to colonize this area. So therefore, there were also some diplomatic questions to be answered to say who really was to occupy that area, the British or the Portuguese, or is it the Germans? So they wanted to clarify first who was to handle that area. So there were several British, Portuguese who were interested in the signing of treaties in the Bembaland as well. So again, occupation of northeastern Rhodesia was different from the northwestern Rhodesia. So northeastern Rhodesia was approached by Europeans from Nyasaland through the effort of Harry Johnson. So we see to it, the first point we said that the chief colonizers were busy. They wanted first to colonize Nyasaland. Now, with that then, colonization of northeastern Rhodesia, it was done through Nyasaland. After they were done occupying Nyasaland, then that's when they were occupying northeastern Rhodesia. So chiefs in this area, they refused to surrender the authority to the Europeans. As such force was used to occupy it. So what happened is that the people of that area, just as we have mentioned, we know now the nature of those people. They were hostile and they refused the coming of the whites, and it was to be done by force. So in 1889, Harry Johnson sent Alfred Sharp to make treaties with the chiefs in the Ruangwa River Valley and Katanga region. So the BSA financed the efforts of the occupation of this area. So it started with Sir Harry Johnson from Nyasaland, who sent Alfred Sharp into that area to sign some agreements with the chiefs in Katanga as well Ruangwa Valley there. So let's look at how Europeans dealt with the groups in that Bembaland, in the Bembaland. So how did they deal with the Swahili Arabs who were in northeast Rhodesia? So the Swahili Arabs, so Arab traders in Ruangwa Valley, they resisted the BSA company rule because they did not want to give up slave trade. So remember, the Swahili Arabs, they came into the interior of Africa looking for slaves. The coming of the British, they were to stop slavery, so it was a conflict there. So lesser chiefs, they supported the British in order to be free from slavery. So you see to it that the victims of the Swahili Arabs, they supported the British to say, yes, come and settle with us. We don't want these Swahili Arabs. They have victimized us for quite long. So that's what happened there. So in 1895, the BSA company forces under Major Forbes, they defeated the Arab slave traders, but they could not stop slave raids. So the the Swahili Arabs, they were defeated in that area, but slave raids did not stop. So most of the Arabs, they took refuge with the powerful Wemba and Lunda chiefs. So they continued slave activities under the protection of these chiefs. So what happened was that when they were defeated, Swahili Arabs, they went and sought refuge under the Wemba and the Lunda chiefs, those who were powerful, the owners of the land now. So in order to establish British authority, the BSA company turned against the Wemba and the Lunda kingdom. So therefore, the British still more, they wanted to occupy that area. So to do that, then therefore they had to use force. So they had to go by force to the Wemba as well as to the Lunda. So they used force to occupy those areas. So how did they deal with the Wemba? So although the Wemba territory was under the British sphere of influence in 1890, the Wemba refused to accept the British authority. So although we are saying that the British, they came to the Bembaland in 1890, the Wemba themselves, they did not allow that. So they had refused to sign treaties with Sir Alfred Sharp and continued slave trading activities because it was beneficial to them. So the major weakness of the Wemba chiefs was that they were hostile to each other. So this encouraged the BSA company to defeat them one by one. So you see to it that the Wemba, still more, they said, we are going to continue with slave trade. But themselves, again, they were not united as all the Wemba to say, as the Wemba were united against the British occupation in this area. So they were also raiding each other. As a result, the British, they used that advantage to say when one group comes to the other chief, they could defend the other chief immediately. Therefore, after that, defeating those others, then those who have been defended, they could say, oh, the British were just denying them. They are just very good people. Hence, they started to defeat one by one the Wemba, and they were all defeated. So what were the strategies that they used in occupying that Bembaland? Number one, they used the missionaries. So the role played by Father Joseph Dupont, who was a Catholic missionary, he established a good relations with the Wemba and encouraged them to accept the British protection. Just as it was with the Lozi or Lewanika, he was encouraged by Francois Coilard. Here we see Father Joseph Dupont. He encouraged the Wemba to accept the British rule. And also they used force. The BSA company used force to overpower the Wemba chiefs, and they forcibly accepted the authority or the British authority. And also by invitation. So the company was invited by Senga, a Senga chief, Chiwala, for help against the Wemba raid. So Major Forbes assisted Chiwala and drove out the Wemba. So with that, then they penetrated again into the Wemba land. So how were the British able to crush the Lunda or penetrate the Lunda in the Wemba land? So here, after the defeat of the Wemba, the BSA company turned attention into the Lunda kingdom. So there you have to take note that the Lunda of Kazembe, they had earlier signed a treaty with Sir Alfred Sharp by asking him for the British protection in his area. But the problem was that they did not give up the slave raids because the British did not tolerate the slave raiding. So Robert Collingdon, who succeeded Major Forbes as the BSA company administrator in the area, called more troops from Nyasaland to come into the area. So the combined British forces, they marched towards Kazembe Kingdom in 1899. So Kazembe ran away to Belgium's territory of Congo. He ran away to Congo. So from there, Kazembe negotiated with the BSA company. So the BSA company allowed him to return and resume his position on the following conditions. So number one was that the condition was that on the condition that he accept the British authority, then he should return. And also, if he gives up slave raiding in the area, then he should return. So we see to it that the British they were so systematic. After the leader ran away to Congo, they did not just say, all right, because the leader is out, now it is to our advantage to occupy the area. No, they still regarded the leader to be present. So they negotiated with him as he was in Congo to say, all right, you have to come back and resume your leadership as the Kazembe of the Lunda here. But the conditions are that you have to accept the authority of the British in your territory. Number two was that you have to stop slave raiding, of which he admitted, and he returned and assumed his position. What about the Ngoni of Mpezeni? How did the British manage to occupy over them? So the Mpezeni Ngoni settled in the present-day Chipata district, that is in Zambia, just near Mchinji there. So the Ngoni did not participate in slave trade activities, but the chief Mpezeni refused to make any treaty with Sir Alfred Sharp in 1890. So this meant that the Ngoni refused to be under the British protection. So we see to it that the Mpezeni, they did not want the British in their territory. So when a lot of Europeans came into the area, the Ngoni interpreted this as a European attempt to control their land. So the Mpezeni Ngoni under their leader Nsingu rebelled against the Europeans in 1897. So in which some Europeans were killed. So what happened was that the BSA company called troops from Nyasaland to help to put down that rebellion by Mpezeni. So the Ngoni were defeated and Nsingu was captured and killed, because also many Europeans were killed there. And the Ngoni had no option but to accept the British rule after the capturing or the killing of their leader. So with the defeat of the Ngoni, then northeastern Rhodesia came under the control of the British. So the British, they managed to also occupy the Bembaland, although most of it was by force. The reason was that they were hostile, and others, they participated in the profitable trade that was the slave trade. So let us look at the comparison. Let us compare between the occupation of northeastern Rhodesia and the northwestern Rhodesia. So let's start with the similarities. So Cecil John Rhodes played a great role in both provinces for the British occupation. So we see to it that in both the East and the West Rhodesia, North Rhodesia, we see to it that Cecil John Rhodes, he played a major role in the occupation, the British occupation. And also, both territories were occupied on economic motives. So we see to it that the British, they had the economic motive when they went to occupy that territory of northern Rhodesia. And again, the treaties were signed in both provinces to empower the British to occupy the area. So there were the signing of treaties in both northeast and northwest Rhodesia. What were the differences in the occupation? We see to it that the northwest Rhodesia was occupied peacefully, whereas northwest Rhodesia was through conquest. So northwest, it was peaceful, just as we looked at Lewanika. He invited the whites to come after he was influenced by others. But here on the eastern side, we saw to it that its tribes, the tribes of the eastern part, they were hostile because they were participating in slave trade. And also during the occupations, northeast Rhodesia was approached through Nyasaland. Northeast was approached through Nyasaland, while western was approached through southern Rhodesia. So when occupying northern Rhodesia, the eastern part, it was through Nyasaland, while the western part, it was through southern Rhodesia. That's what we saw to it. And again, northwestern Rhodesia was invited the British to settle in the area for protection, whereas the northeast Rhodesia, they resisted the coming or the invasion of the British. So there was that difference there. Well, the west, they invited the British. We see the east, they were resisting the British. So let us look at the administration of Northern Rhodesia. How was Northern Rhodesia administered? So from 1891 to 1894, the BSA company administered the area through Harry Johnson, who was based in Nyasaland. So Rhodesia was administered first by using the British who was in Nyasaland by the name Harry Johnson. So in 1894, the British, they separated the area from Nyasaland and allowed the BSA company to appoint the administrator and officials for the area. So that's what we see by 1894. Then there was the separation of power there to say no, Johnson remained in Nyasaland and this area is going to be administered by the BSA company, and the BSA company is going to appoint the one who was going to be the administrator. So the first BSA company administrator of Rhodesia was Major Forbes, who was succeeded by Robert Condrington in 1897. And in 1911, Northwest Rhodesia and Northeast Rhodesia, they were united under one administration, and their capital became Livingstone. So Livingstone became to be known as their capital city of the united Northeast and Northwest Rhodesia. So today we know Zambia, the capital city is Lusaka, but this time we're talking about, it was Livingstone, that was the capital city. So here now we have arrived at a point where we will be looking at the colonial administrative policy for Northern Rhodesia. So what were the policies for administration? How did they administer Northern Rhodesia after now they occupied it? So both Southern and Northern Rhodesia were originally administered by the BSA company. So we have to take note there that the Northern Rhodesia, which is Zambia, and the Southern Rhodesia, which is Zimbabwe, they were both first administered by the BSA company and not Nyasaland. Nyasaland, it was under the British consul or the British delegate who was sent by the British government to administer this area. So although the company policies were the same in the two territories, there were some differences. Which came about of a number of factors. So the differences were there in the policies, but those differences, they were influenced by a number of factors. Number one was the Northern Rhodesia was bigger territory than Southern Rhodesia. So when you are applying the policies, it means sometimes if they will be the same affecting the people, the same people. Sometimes it may not work when the other side maybe has got higher population than the other. So here we are talking of the territory itself. Zambia was very big than Zimbabwe. And again, the European population in northern Rhodesia was much smaller, like 1,500 by 1911. And southern Rhodesia, by 1860, there were already 5,000 Europeans. So you see to it, much as the territory in Zambia, it was bigger, but we see to it that there were few Europeans. And in southern Rhodesia, much as the territory was smaller, but there were a lot of Europeans there. So even the policies, sometimes they could not work the same. So colonial administrative policies had lesser severe impact on Africans in northern Rhodesia. So we see to it that the colonial administrative policies, their policies, the colonial policies, they were more strict in southern Rhodesia than in northern Rhodesia. You can see the reason here to say there were very few Europeans in northern Rhodesia. So let us look at these policies. Number one is the land policies. Land policies. So first, the first governor of Northern Rhodesia was Herbert Stanley, and he encouraged European immigration. And to this effect, he reserved large tracts of land for exclusive future European use. So this land was mainly situated along the railway line between Livingstone and Katanga, and the areas around Fort Jameson, Broken Hill, the Abercorn, all those areas, they were reserved for the future use by the Europeans. So Europeans, they began to grow cotton and tobacco in northern Rhodesia. So the need for more arable land made European settlers to press for the removal of Africans from good land into the reserve. So in 1911, the BSA company demarcated the first reserves for Africans. So the excessive game hunting as well made by the Africans, it forced the government to establish the game reserve in Ruangwa Valley in 1902. So Africans were now and again hunting the game. So with that, then the colonial administration created a game reserve to say this is now is a government protected area around the Ruangwa Valley. So they did that. And again, we are saying here that they demarcated now to say this area, it is for the Africans only. Africans are not supposed to go to the other areas. So they made those demarcations in different areas. So the BSA rule ended in 1924 in Northern Rhodesia. And there then, Northern Rhodesia became a British protectorate, to say it was now the British government that was administering it from 1924. So the protectorate administrators continued to give more land to Europeans. So much as there was that change of administration to say now it's not the company, that is in 1924, when they changed from the company to the British government, still more the administrators of the area, still more they were favoring the Europeans. However, by 1928, the government noticed that the land assigned to Africans became devastated from overuse, severe soil erosion, and deforestation, and falling water table. So from 1928 to 1929, the government established the new reserve. So after the government, the British colonial government now noticed that Africans, where they settled, they were using the same land now and again, and that land, it was somehow diluted. It could not produce more as expected. Hence, the government now allocated other lands to the Africans. Let's look at the labor policies. So Northern Rhodesia was mainly valuable as labor reserve for mines in both Katanga, that is Zaire, and Southern Rhodesia. So Northern Rhodesia at first, it was regarded just as the labor reserve for Katanga region for copper mining, and southern region, or southern Rhodesia, that was for the mines that were there. So a smaller European population in northern Rhodesia meant a limited demand for African labor. So since we have already said that there were few Europeans in northern Rhodesia, therefore their demand again for more labor that was needed there, it was not effective. So what happened was that in 1898, Mr. Fred Crewe, he visited northern Rhodesia and organized village headmen to supply labor to Matebele land. So when mining started in northern Rhodesia in 1904, the miners complained about loss of labor, leading to the prohibition of labor recruitment in the country. So what happened was that Southern Rhodesia was in high demand for labor. So there were people who were coming to employ people to go to Southern Rhodesia. Now, in 1904, mining started now in Northern Rhodesia, and they needed more people. So you see to it that Southern Rhodesia at the same time needed people, and Northern Rhodesia at the same time also needed people. So there was that like a scramble for labor. Hence, there was the prohibition to say no labor shall go outside Zambia or outside Northern Rhodesia. There was a prohibition of recruitment from outside the country. So in 1907, the recruitment for the contract labor was introduced as a way of forcing Africans to work in areas they did not want to live. So Mtandizi, that was Southern Rhodesia Native Labor Bureau, was the only organization which was allowed to recruit the labor from Northern Rhodesia. So with that then, there was only one bureau that was allowed to employ people from Northern Rhodesia to Southern Rhodesia. And in 1908, Southern Rhodesia Administration took over the responsibility of recruiting labor from Northern Rhodesia, So you have to take note here that the urge of paying tax forced Africans to travel distant places to search for work. Unfortunately, working conditions in those places were worse, and most Africans died due to gross neglect, malnutrition, scurvy, pneumonia, and acute dysentery. So Africans, they were forced to travel to other areas where they could find employment. The major reason was the payment of tax. They did not have any means of paying tax apart from working from somewhere and pay the tax. So they were forced. So the places where they were going, they were not conducive environment. As such, people died. A lot of people died because the employers, they could not bother, they could not mind, provided they make profit. So no food there, hence they suffered from malnutrition. No good water, scurvy there, and again pneumonia, acute dysentery because of the environment, which was not good. So what were the impacts of labor policies on the Africans? Number one was low wages were given to Africans. Number two, congestion and disease in some of the workplaces. So there was congestion, many people working at a very small area. And also families broke up because most men left their wives in search of employment elsewhere. This is just reminding me what is happening maybe in some parts of the country or our country today. You see, many people travel to South Africa to work, but there sometimes you find that they leave their wives here. When they go there, they don't call their wives and they just stay there. Sometimes they meet other Malawians there, then they marry there and they forget home. Many instances are happening in the same way. So it also was happening in northern Rhodesia, whereby when people were going out to look for work, with the bad conditions that were there, then they were just living hopelessly to say, maybe now let me just keep on living here. I don't have any hope of going back home after all. What will I say to my parents or to my family? Then let me just work and die here because there's no hope. So many people left their homes, left their wives, and they never came back. And also taxation policies. Just like the Southern Rhodesia, the tax in Northern Rhodesia was closely linked to labor. So tax was introduced in order to force Africans to take up paid jobs. So they introduced tax to say each one has to pay the tax. The reason was to force those Africans to go and work in the farms. So in 1889, a hard tax of 5 shilling was introduced to say everyone who has got a house is supposed to pay a 5 shilling as a tax. So due to lack of employment opportunities and non-existent of local markets, then men had no option but to go to Southern Rhodesia to work there. Just like Southern Rhodesia, the brutal tactics were used, such as holding wives and the hostage to get the hard tax. So we mentioned when we were talking of Southern Rhodesia to say when someone has defaulted or has failed to pay the tax, that one, his wife was taken as a hostage until he pays the tax. So how do you pay the tax? Then you go to work first, then you are paid, then you pay the tax, then your wife is released. So you have also to take note that tax collection was easier in Northern Rhodesia as compared to Southern Rhodesia. So in Southern Rhodesia, most people were resisting, then they were resisting a lot, unlike the Northern Rhodesians.